Hi, this is Jermaine. Welcome to another episode of The Story of Us. Have you ever felt like you do not belong? Have you ever felt like you do not fit in any culture? Today, I am excited to have my friend Alfred, and today we're gonna have a conversation about the challenge of not belonging. I'm so excited to have you today, Alfred.
Thank you. Hi, Jermaine. I am very, very excited too. And thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure.
Um, that's my pleasure indeed. I just want to mention that we used to work together, right? And
That's
then we
correct.
kind of bond. And honestly, I think that you are the perfect fit to discuss this topic. You said you're originally from Albania. You left at 17 to London, England. After 8 years, you moved to Sweden and lived there for 10 years. Half of your family lives in Italy and the other half in London. That's so amazing. Albania being a warm culture, contrary maybe to England, which is a cold culture, I am really wondering, and I think 17 is pretty young. How was it for you? What was your experience? Was it easy to integrate to another culture when you first left?
Well, let me just make a couple of mentions there. So I did move from Albania when I was 17, but along the way I did turn 18. So I was not, I was not that young. I was 18. So along the way I did get to 18 just before I got to England. And to answer your question, well, I must say that it was a very, very different culture. So it took me quite a lot to adapt. It took me quite a lot to learn the language perfectly. I mean, I spoke
Mhm.
some English. That wasn't really, it wasn't really as good as you'd expect. So I would definitely say that, yeah, it has been quite challenging. I guess just like it would have been for any young boy like such as myself coming from a
Mhm.
country like Albania. Yeah, it was quite challenging in many directions, especially. Well, I would say, amongst all things, I think the food didn't quite meet the expectations, and also
Uh,
the weather was not great, which had a great impact on me. Being Mediterranean, but overall, yeah, it had its challenges, but I'm sure it served for the good in the greater aspect of things. I think it has helped me a lot. But then I guess we'll talk about it a bit later on.
yeah, yeah, sure. And what was the biggest cultural shock for you? Like for me, coming from a very warm culture like in Cameroon, it has always been so strange for me to get in a bus, sit next to somebody, and not have to greet the person. In Cameroon, it's just like it's a must. If you pass by a place, if you get in a taxi, the polite way is just say hi or good morning or good afternoon. So that was a really shock for me. So what was your biggest shock when you first moved to England, both in England and Sweden as well?
Well. I have a lot to say about that, but I think the biggest shock, definitely by far, was that those people have milk in their tea. Now that's a shock. But I, I would say that well, besides the jokes, um, it is actually. I think you have to put the emphasis on exactly that because there's a level of coldness in England, but then
Mhm.
if you come to Sweden, then it's beyond that. I mean, it's a lot more than that. So people are a lot colder here. Like it's unbelievable. Already in England, I think because England is a melting pot, and London itself is a city. It's a multinational city. So
Mhm.
there's many cultures from all over the world. I think I found myself quite well there. I wouldn't say it has been that bad, so to speak. But yeah, there were the I think the challenges were that you never felt like you could open up and speak your mind and
Mm,
open up your heart to
mhm,
anybody, because you just felt like they never understood you, and they probably
mm,
did understand you better than you think they did. But I think you in yourself, you were kind of browsing, or you're kind of within everybody. You were in the middle of everybody, yet at the same time you felt like an outsider, obviously, because
mm,
yeah, you
mm.
just didn't feel like you were understood, and clearly the cultures don't really match. So
Yeah.
so yeah, but I would say yeah,
And
it was challenging
and
to
in terms
fit
of
in. That's
behavior, is it not anything that has really shocked you, like that you saw, you just like, oh my God, what is this?
I think well, I think because I've lived there for such a long time, and now it's kind of hard to remember my first initial impacts that I had. But I think that yeah, I think it goes back to family and relationships. I don't think that we
Mm,
treat people exactly the same way, and I don't think that we value our relationships the same way. And I'm talking, when I say we, I mean Mediterraneans, Africans, and Northern Europeans, and so on. I think that we treat them very, very differently. And for me, for example, it was very, very normal to be with my brothers, for example, because I got two
mhm.
brothers in England, and it's very normal to even live in the same house, whereas in England it's definitely not.
Exactly. Yeah.
Everybody, so to speak, has to be independent by the age of 18. Everybody has to, follow their own path, which has its upsides, I'm sure. But it just felt, to me anyway, from my perspective, from my point of view, it just felt like they did not see each other with the same eyes that I see my mom, or I
Mm,
see my dad, or my brother, or my sister. They just didn't look at each other in the same way, or at least I didn't feel that. Or maybe they have their own secret language that I don't really know about. So I think
exactly.
that's the one thing that really hit me when I understood that human relationships are different there. Now I cannot say that they're better or worse.
Hmm.
Objectively, I would definitely have a lot to say in that regard. But
Hmm.
again, I cannot pinpoint it, because I just don't know. I mean, I don't know what it's like to be a British person or a Swede, and trust me, I can talk a bit more negatively and a bit more harshly about the Swedish culture than I can talk about the English culture. That's for sure.
Hmm. Exactly. And I think being immersed in different culture help you to grow and also not to be offended. I remember an experience. I lived in Eswatini for a year. And during my time in Eswatini, we
Yeah,
were living in a base. There were so many different cultures, people from different countries, nationalities, and everything. And this one story really struck me. There was a couple from Germany, and one day we were all seated in a living room. I am the Cameroonian. There was a lady from Zimbabwe. There was other from Swaziland. We as African, we kind of have a common ground culture in terms of warm culture. And
that's
then
really
that
nice.
man goes into the kitchen. We are in the living room with his wife. He's preparing sandwiches. And he prepared 4 sandwiches. We were about maybe 6 or 8 in the living room. He comes back with 2 plates, and then he handed one to his wife, and he sit with one of this plate, and he sit and he's just eating, which is for
Wow.
us. From
Wow.
like they didn't ask us like, do you want, for my culture, in my culture, if you do not have enough, you do not eat at all. You eat only if you can share with the other. It
That's
would be
amazing.
so rude to sit in
That
front of people and just eat your food. That
that
was
is
a
that's
very shock.
oh my God, that's you know what, that is a real true shock, and I can actually understand, but that going back to the African culture, actually, that it is quite beautiful actually, and I obviously being from the Mediterranean, I think I'd understand it a lot more than a Swede or a German would. Um, and
Hmm.
I've also had the chance to I've got many good friends from Africa. I've got good friends from Senegal and from Kenya, and I've
Hmm.
experienced that firsthand. Like because I used to share a flat in Sweden with my friend from Senegal, and it was exactly that. Like he wouldn't dare to go cook and not offer me food or not give me a share of his food, and I would do the
Culturally,
same, of
it's
course.
rude.
But it
You
was
don't do
just
that.
it was it was unexpected. It was just not going to happen. I mean, there was no way that the guy wouldn't share the food with me. And it was the same when I was in a group of Africans. I would always be offered food and drinks. It was just unfathomable. Like you couldn't even believe that somebody would just sit there and eat their own food. That's just so selfish. And and actually, I have a really good story that really really hit me here in Sweden. And I've told this to my friends as well. I used to work at IKEA, clearly, because you come to Sweden and you work at
Hmm.
IKEA, of course, or as they call it here, IKEA. And a story that really hit me was there were about four young kids that came to get food. They
Mm.
got their food, and I realized that actually only one of the kids ordered. I don't remember exactly what he ordered, but he ordered a big plate with meatballs, I think it was, and chips
Hmm.
and some other stuff, a drink and a ribbon. And the rest of the kids, the other three kids, only ordered chips, like fries. So then I got curious, and I looked at them. They went and sat, and I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw this one kid, who had this big tray. He had a plate full of food, and he had the chips on the side, and he had some other vegetables or whatever he had on the side. And he was eating his own food, and his other
Hmm.
three friends were only eating the chips. They were not sharing the food. And honestly, like I don't mean to be harsh here, but I thought to myself, if that was my child, I have failed as a parent. That's how I felt inside me. Like I felt, if
Hmm.
that is my child one day, I have absolutely failed as a parent. Because I just couldn't believe my eyes.
You know,
Because,
and
if a
and
child is
again,
taught,
it's because it's your culture. And I've learned
exactly,
to not be offended because it's a foreign concept for them. For them, it's
correct,
normal. And I think
correct, it's
maybe that would be rude to
correct,
actually
correct.
share.
Correct. And it again, this is what I said like previously when I said I'm not able to judge the other countries because I wouldn't know. Because I don't know. Because in their
Mm,
world it's totally fine. Here in
mm,
Sweden they have this thing that they call it's called Swish. It's basically a payment method that you
mm.
send money to each other through your phone, and it goes very fast. It goes in seconds. So whenever let's say 3 or 4 Swedes will sit down to have a drink or to have food, they will always mention, "Oh, are you gonna swish me?" Which means, are you gonna give me, like, if I pay, are you gonna give me that share? So if it's shared in four, then you have to all swish to
Yes,
me because I'm the one that paid. And there's no
exactly.
such. Whereas I go out, for example, with my Albanian friends, and they pay around, I pay around, and who keeps count? Nobody keeps count really. So it's
And
it's it's fascinating.
it's really fascinating. Again, for my culture, if you ask somebody out, if you are the one to say, hey, let's go out, it implies that you are the one who's going to pay the bills, who's going to take care of the bills.
Exactly the
And
same in
I've
the Albanian
learned,
culture. You're the one who's gonna pay. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I've learned the hard way that for cold culture, that's not the same. They'll be like, no, let's go, let's go, let's go. And then even for dates, when somebody asks you out on a date, even the first date, you have to pay your bills, which for me, it's something very interesting
So,
because
so, so you mean,
in
so you
my
mean,
culture,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. No, so you mean to say that if you were to be asked on a date, for example, by let's say
Mhm.
German guy or I don't know Scandinavian guy, then he asks you on a date, then you expect him to pay, right?
Mhm.
right? Which makes
I
sense.
did
But
before.
yeah.
I expected before, but since I've been immersed in different cultures, now I have learned. I have learned that that's not how it is, you know. And like one day there is a guy from Germany. He asked me out, but I was already preparing my mind, you know, that this is not Cameroon, this is not Africa. You go prepared. But I always have this expectation in my mind. Though I was prepared, but I still had that expectation. And at the end of the date and the conversation and everything, I pull out my purse,
Oh
hoping
boy. Oh
for the
boy. Here we go.
gentleman to say, it's okay. But no, I
But
had
I
to pay
mean,
my bills.
you did your part. I mean, you did your part. I would have appreciated if you did that. It's just a gesture, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that's incredible, fascinating to
But
see how cultures are very different.
they are. Have you experienced that in Albania as well?
No, I think I find a lot of similarity in terms of warm culture with Albanian and most cultures in Africa, like Cameroon. In Albania, like in Cameroon, people literally fight to pay the bills.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah.
no, I'm paying. They're just like, no. We literally fight over the bills here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
It's fascinating.
yeah. And I want to know, do you recall a specific time where you felt like you do not belong at all? And what was your experience at that moment?
Um, I guess I'd have to think about this a little bit. But when I was in England again, I did it. It didn't really feel it didn't really matter all that much, and I think it's because I was with my brothers, because two of my brothers lived there,
Mhm.
so I always had some home to come back to.
Mm, mm,
Whereas
mm,
in Sweden, I think I felt that a lot more. And I think that it's got to do with acceptance. So if you feel like if you're in another culture and you feel like you're accepted for who you are and what you are, your character, your charisma, your way of being, your way of seeing things, and so on and so forth, then it doesn't really matter whether you get accepted or not. But I think if you're in a culture where you don't feel like you could be yourself, then it's
mm,
problematic. And unfortunately, I've felt that in Sweden. Yeah, I feel like I feel like in here you're not really allowed to be yourself. You can't be too
mm,
funny. You can't be too humorous. You can't be too sad. You can't be too happy. You can't be too whatever it is that whatever spectrum of emotions that you're going through. You cannot have too much of, because
mm,
they have this culture where everybody has to be the same. Everybody has to not stand out. Everybody has to follow the rules. Everybody has to be equal. And
mm.
I think in other terms they call that communism. But I don't want to be, I don't want to jump the gun there. I don't want to, yeah. But I mean, yeah. So you're not really allowed to be yourself, and that really doesn't sit right with me. You could say whatever you
I
want
see.
about other cultures. For example, the culture in Albania might be, there's certain, you know, things that are not quite right with the culture. But at the same time, I believe that it's very, very important to be yourself, to be able to be yourself, to
Mm,
feel like you can be yourself. Whatever type of character you have, you should be able to express that. And I was able to express that in England a lot more than I could in Sweden. And again, I think this might
mhm,
be due to the fact that London is a multicultural country, as well as I had a family, I had a home to come back to. So the impact was not
mm.
that great, I think. But in Sweden, it's a lot more, yeah, it's different.
So you You came back recently in Albania for a few months. And
Correct. 6 months. Yes.
yeah, and I know this question is gonna be strange, but what was your cultural shock when you came back in
Oh.
Albania? Because I guess being immersed in so different cultures, when you come back to your original culture, you may feel some kind of shock, some few things that feel strange to you.
So I've actually been to many countries around the world. I've traveled a lot. I've only lived in England and Sweden, but I've actually traveled a lot. I've traveled to the US, to Russia, uh, pretty much all of Europe. The only places I haven't been to is Asia, Middle East, and South America, I would say. And when I've been coming back to Albania every now and then. I've traveled back, and there are many cultural shocks, I would say, but I think exactly like you said, when you're used to a completely different way of seeing things being done, then a lot of things shock you when you go back to your own culture. And I think
Mm-hmm.
you just have to sort of accept certain things and just take a deep breath and keep going, because then you understand, because you see it once you're immersed in a different culture. Going back to your own culture, it's like a book that you've already read, and you just kind of find yourself accepting things and understanding them, or trying to understand their perspective, their point of view. When you compare it to, for example, the American culture, or when you compare it to the Swedish or German or British, when you compare the two, then you can see the flaws in each and every one of them, of course. Some are major and some are minor, but I think that for me, especially for me, I started to accept Albania and I started to enjoy it. And I came with the mindset of, no matter what happens, no matter how badly I might get treated or whatever, um, I want to accept this culture. I want to live here, and I just want to, yeah, I just want to be. And no matter how many bad things happen or how many shocks I have during the day, and I had plenty, trust me, uh, that I'm just gonna accept it. And that was my attitude. And
Yeah.
I think attitude has got a lot to do with how you see things.
You know,
Even here,
what what I find very interesting here, as I can hear you speaking, I have the impression that you kind of distance yourself a little bit from the culture. And that raises a question. When you came back to Albania, or how many times when you came back, have you ever felt like you do not belong to your own people?
yeah, yeah,
Or-
I felt that quite deeply, actually.
Mm,
I mean, going back to the fact that you and I used to work together, exactly at the work that we used to work for, at the yeah, at the place. Um, there was one guy, Donny. I don't know if you remember Don yet. And
I don't
he,
think so.
he'd had pretty much the same story as me. He'd lived in Canada for about more over 16 years, and then he'd come back.
Mm,
And I would say that he was probably the only person that I could relate to. Him, weirdly enough, him, Radames, who was from South America.
mhm,
There were certain times where I could relate a lot more. And I mean, you saw me hanging out with Radames a lot more than I hung out with the rest, which was really
mhm,
weird. And I was asking myself, how is it possible that I'm back in my own country, but at the same time, I'm relating a lot more to a guy who's from South America,
mm.
or a guy who's from Africa, or a guy who's lived in Canada just like I have. It's a very, very
Yeah,
strange thing, but there were moments where
that's
I felt like
that's
I don't know if I
yeah,
belong
go
in the
ahead,
Albanian culture anymore.
exactly. That has been the same
I felt
feeling
very
for me.
foreign.
And what I've kind of come to understand is that since you're immersed in so different cultures, at the end of the day, you have your own culture. You do not
Yeah,
have
you
your
kind of
home
shape yourself
culture,
up. Yeah,
or you do not have the culture of the country where you're living in. It's just like you have
no,
taken some part of your own culture, the part, and you have built your little bubble, and that can bring a feeling of loneliness at some point because there is no one who can really understand you because you still have your home culture that you have to express in somehow, but your
yeah,
host culture do not understand that. And again,
correct.
also in your home culture, no one will be able to understand the new you. I mean, the new culture that you have built up. You find yourself being in your little bubble, having your own culture,
Yeah,
not the
yeah,
two cultures.
yeah. That's so true. That is very true. I probably couldn't have said it better myself. I think you end up sort of mixing up your own culture with other cultures,
Mm,
ideas, ways of thinking, and all the rest. And in the end, you do create your own way of seeing the world, I guess. So no,
yeah,
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 it's not gonna fit in with everybody. That's for sure.
exactly. Now I want to know what are some aspects of your personal culture that when you compare to the Albanian culture and the Sweden culture feels strange to you.
I think it's definitely the the human relationships. So
Mm,
the interaction between people. I think that's the strongest side of it. Sweden is mostly concentrated on individualistic properties. So you have to be independent. You mind your own business wherever you go. You don't disturb anybody. You don't bother anybody. You mind your own. Yeah, you exist sort of in for yourself first and most. And then if you can somehow, no, actually, if it's in your best interest to help other people, then you
mm-hmm,
do. But otherwise, you don't bother them. Just mind your own business. For example, you'll see a lot of people. You'll hear this everywhere, but in Sweden, when you go and sit in a bus, people sit, one like there's one seat, and then one is empty, and then someone is sitting, and everybody is sitting. For
really?
example, but yeah, everybody's sitting by the window. You only go and sit next to somebody if there really is no other option. Like if you really have no other space in the bus or train, that's when you go and sit next to a person. But otherwise, you do not. And
That's really interesting because
the
here in
majority,
Albania, I
yeah,
have some friends who usually say that Albania don't have the sense of privacy. In the sense that
yeah,
when you are in
that's
the
very true.
bus in
That
the
is true.
night, people are always like this.
Yeah, yeah, I noticed that actually when I was, for example, when I was buying bread or when I was exchanging money,
Yeah.
or whenever I find myself in a queue, because I was used to the Swedish way, because obviously people here really have a sense of a good awareness of where they're at, like where they're physically standing. Whereas in Albania, I felt
Hmm.
like they have no sense of that. Literally, people would come and like literally bump onto you, and I'm like, dude, shouldn't you keep a bit of a distance? You're kind of bothering me. I'm looking at my phone. You're breathing down my neck. and and I'm whereas here in Sweden, everybody keeps their distance, and like I said, you'll always find empty seats in between each seat on a bus or a train, and everybody
Hmm.
was there if they really really have to, but they would much rather stand actually, and they always go around with their headphones, because they want to block out.
Mm.
Like today, for example, in the break room at work, I was talking to. There's a colleague there who's also from Albania, and I was sitting in the break room with him, and the Swedish guy comes. He looks at us. He kind of does this nervous smile, and then he sits kind of next to us. but he has his headphones on. So we're having a full-on conversation while he's just standing there having his lunch. Doesn't want to.
Mm,
And actually, I need to mention this. I think that every culture is kind of infectious, and it can
mm.
be infectious in a good way, but it can be also infectious in a really horrible way.
So
And what I
true.
mean by that is that the Swedish culture is scaring me because many times I myself acting like them. There has been many times
Mm,
where I've tried to avoid people because that's what you do in Sweden. You know, this is just the way things are. And then I think to myself, why am I doing this? This is not me. Why am I not just striking a conversation with somebody like I would? But then again, you're the odd one out if you do. You're
mm.
taken as a weirdo. Like if you just strike a conversation out of the blue, out of nowhere, then you're a weirdo. Or there's something wrong with you, or people will just be polite to you.
And I do have a question for you.
Go ahead.
Today, do you still feel like you do not belong anywhere? Whether in Sweden, in Albania, in Italy, or in London, do you still have that feeling of not belonging?
I have a feeling of what I consider to be best for me, but or what culture, what country, and what way of thinking is good for me, meaning that I would like to be immersed in it for my own good. But yes, absolutely, I do feel that there's no such thing as home anymore. Like you just create your own home because once you've seen so much, once you've traveled so much, once you've swam in so many different waters, I don't think it's
Mm,
easy to say, "Oh, I belong here. I want to stay here." I think it just becomes more and more difficult. But I think eventually you just make peace with the best worst thing,
mm,
and and you just move on for your own good. Like you might decide in my case anyway. I think I will decide a culture where that I can learn from, a culture
mm,
where I admire, even though I might disagree with, even though I might
mm.
dislike it. I think I will choose a culture where I feel that I can make progress and that I can become a better version of myself. I can become smarter, more thoughtful. I can become whatever I need to become, even if it's more aggressive towards the world. So be it.
That's very interesting that you mentioned the word home. I remember I was having a conversation with uh, Jim and Ricardo on the same podcast, and they mentioned the concept of home that was really interesting for me. Like you said, home is not a place, but home is a person that at some point in his life, he felt home because his partner was there. And everywhere in the world feels like home because there's this one person that understands you and he's with you. So I'm really wondering, do you think that you will be able to find your home in a physical place, or you will find your home inside you and with a group of people?
Oh well. Uh, I have to say the second definitely. I think that it's
Mm,
we have a saying in Albanian where we say it's not it's not, I guess it's not the country that makes the person, or it's not the place that makes the person, but it's the person that makes the place. Or
oh, wow.
it's not the country that
Say that
makes the
again,
person.
please.
It's not the country that makes the person, it's the person that makes the country.
Oh,
So
wow. Beautiful.
I don't know if that translates directly and well into English, but I guess what they meant with that is that it doesn't really matter where you are as long as you're with the right people. I think I
Mm.
think that yeah, I think it goes along those lines. So definitely, yeah, I believe that it's got to do more with who you're surrounded by rather than the physical place.
Mm. So, in this state of not belonging, and I'm wondering, how do you do to keep balance? How do you keep your sanity? How do you
I've got
hold on
yeah,
together?
I've got to say it's very, very challenging. I've got to say it's very, very challenging. Lately, I believe that the more, the older I grow, the more I understand these things, and I
Mm-hmm.
believe that it really has a lot to do with attitude. Because you could be living in, you could be swimming in riches. You could be rich. You could have anything that your heart desires. You can have money. You can have
Mm,
all sorts of uh, materialistic stuff. You could have anything really, and still be miserable. And that's because it's
mm.
your mindset. It's just how you are, how you are baked. I think this has got to do a lot with your childhood as well. I don't know if you want to go into that because that would be a very, very long conversation, but I think it's got a lot to do with childhood and how
For
you were brought
another
up.
episode,
Yeah.
we're gonna
And yeah.
address that.
And I yeah, so I think that it's got a lot to do with attitude. One thing that I'm trying to do a lot more nowadays, a lot more of, is appreciation. I'm trying to appreciate, for
Mm,
example, now I'm in Sweden and I'm trying to appreciate Sweden for what it gives me,
mm,
for what I get, for what I don't get, and
mm,
everything in between. I try to be grateful, and I think
mm.
that has been missing from my life because I realized, and this is probably a secret that if an Albanian were to hear this, they're gonna dislike this, but I'm gonna say a truth that it's very, very true. I realized that not just Albania, but in this case, I can mention Albania because I'm Albanian, and so they just have to suck it up. What can they do? So I realized that we complain a lot as a nation, and I realized in me that even when I was in Albania, everybody around me would complain a lot. Oh, Albania is
Mm,
this. Oh no, the government doesn't work. The streets are bad. The weather's it's too hot. It's too cold. It's too this. It's too that. And that really affected me as a child, and I think that I have that within me because it's been ingrained and programmed within me,
mm,
and
mm,
it never seemed to be the people that I was surrounded by never seemed to be able to find joy in anything really, and I think that tends to become a part of you, whether you like it or not. And then you tend to start seeing life as that, as as
mm,
as as um as a drag. You don't really appreciate anything around you. And I'm sure that there were many bad things, and still are many bad things in Albania or in any other culture, or in any other country for the matter. But I think that being appreciative, appreciating what you have, being grateful for what you have, finding peace in whatever you do, whatever surroundings you have, do the best with what you have.
mm,
I think really,
mm.
really puts your heart and mind at ease. And then from there, you could probably build something. So I'm trying to answer your question, how am I keeping sane? I think I'm reinforcing that a lot more nowadays. And I'm trying
Mm.
to appreciate where I am right now, what I have, and just be grateful for it. And then from here, I could probably make other steps that will make my life better. But if I don't appreciate where I am right now, probability is that even if I get more, or if I get to wherever I want to get to, whatever that is, I will not be happy then either, because it's not what I have; it's how I am and who I am inside me. So
Mm.
if I'm not appreciative of what I have, then I'll never find joy. I'll never find fulfillment.
I think what you say makes so much sense. And that has been my own experience. It's just like when your mindset, the way you think shifts, though you're still in the same environment, but your experience and your reality change. And that's so true because
Absolutely.
unfortunately I was like that also complaining a lot about Albania, my experience here. But at some point, something shifted in my mind, and I've started like you, just cultivate this behavior of gratitude. Just being able to take simple walk. And I'm
Yeah,
so grateful about that. And you start to feel happy, you know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Things
yeah,
haven't
yeah.
changed around you,
No,
but
it's all the
you
same.
feel happy inside. And so your point is so valid. So to keep
No, I,
sanity when you do not belong, when you do not feel like you fit, is to keep an attitude of gratitude. Be
that's
grateful
it.
of what you have and
That's it.
where you are. Oh wow.
That's
That's
it.
so
That's it.
beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
No,
for that.
likewise. Thank you. I'm very happy that you're going in the same direction, and I'm very happy that you've realized this as well. And because it's really relieving. I mean, for me, Albania helped me with this a lot because I
Mhm.
even working down there, because I was there for 6 months. Working there, I realized that hey, I'm not making not even half as much as I make in Sweden. But at the same time,
Mm,
I feel happy. Like I'm happy here because I have people I go play football with. I have friends. I have international friends. You and Adames and
mm.
everybody. So still, I'm living my life in a not a luxurious way by any means, but I was so appreciative. And I thought to
Mm.
myself, wait a minute, if I can be grateful and thankful for the things that I have in Albania, which are really not much if I compare them to Sweden, then why
Mm.
can I not be grateful in Sweden as well? And then
Wow,
changing
beautiful.
countries and yeah, changing countries and all that might change some aspects for sure. It's gonna make my life a bit easier, and it's probably certain things work much better here, but at the same time, finding joy where you are right now
Mm.
with everything you have, being
In the
appreciative, being
small
grateful,
things.
being at peace. Exactly, being at peace. That just changes your whole energy completely. You're completely like
Wow,
you swim in different waters entirely.
wow. So, I
And
have a
don't
question
complain.
for
That's
you.
it. Stop complaining.
No complaint. Wow, that's
No
beautiful.
complaining. It
So
does
true.
not help. It does not help.
But how do we do not to complain? Because as human beings, we usually tend to complain when things are not working the way we expect them to work.
I honestly think, no, I don't think, I believe this deeply that
Mm,
we create our own thoughts. Like we create our own hell and we create our own paradise. We definitely do that. Because when you think, for example, when you have one expectation of whichever scenario to go away you want it to go, and then it doesn't, you automatically feel bad. But then if you think
mm,
about it, you created your own hell by having high expectations. So you're
mhm,
expecting this job application, or you're expecting this your life, or you're expecting whatever you're expecting it to be at this level, to have these things and that and that and that. And then it doesn't go that way. And then you automatically feel sad. So what you've done is that you've created in your head an idea of how something should be. And then when that
mm,
idea is not met, then automatically you feel bad. Whereas what you should have done is that you should have gone in with a mindset of, okay, this is bad and this is good, balance it out, and
mm,
just be grateful. It is what it is.
mm.
You're like, so you don't have to create, like, when you create something in your head, like you create a paradise, so to speak, and then that it doesn't match with the
Doesn't
reality.
manifest.
Exactly, it
Mhm,
doesn't manifest. Then you get sad. But if you think about it, you're the one who created that. So you're
mm.
creating your own misery. Why would you do
So the
that?
key
Just be
here
be objective.
is to be grateful for the little things.
Absolutely, I really think be grateful. Yeah, yeah, and stop
And I
creating
think
ideas
that
in your head.
when you start to be grateful with the little things, it becomes like a culture. It grows, and complaints also disappear when you
They
start
do,
just to exactly.
they do, they
Um,
absolutely do, they absolutely do.
yeah. So, what will you say to somebody like you who have been immersed in different cultures? and maybe who doesn't have the experience that you have or the maturity that you have, what advice will you give to somebody like that who feels like they do not belong and they feel lost?
Do you mean this in general? Do you mean from a specific country like Albania, or a third world country, or how do you
In
mean it? Or do you
general,
just mean it in
in
general?
general, yes.
Number one, be appreciative of what you have. Absolutely, number one, be appreciative. Appreciate whatever you
Mm,
have. Do the best with what you have at the moment, right now. Do
wow.
the best. Do the what you have right now. Whatever you have around you, even though you might think it's very little, just appreciate the fact that you have food in your belly, you have a roof over your head, you have clothes to wear, you have friends, family, and so on. And I understand that some people are unfortunate enough not to have even those things, and that's very, very sad. Um, but I believe even those people, if they're appreciative and acceptive of their situations,
Mm,
because in the end you just have to accept where you are. If there's nothing you can do about it, you just first and foremost you have to accept where you are and what you have and what you are. Then from there, you can start to make progress. You can start to set goals. I believe that human beings are not made to be in stagnation. The moment you're in
mm,
stagnation, that's when you start to die. Because as humans, we either make progress or we regress. One
mm,
or the other. You cannot stay in one place. You're either making progress or you're either making regress. So one or the other. And I think it's in our best interest to set goals for ourselves, whatever they might be. It doesn't really matter. The very fact that we set a goal, however small that might be, and we achieve it, gives us a really good feeling about ourselves, gives us more self-confidence. And if we can take care of the small things first, if we're patient with the small things in life, it could be anything, really. It could be just, I don't know, fixing your room, or it could be just
mm,
wiping your tables, or I don't know, or dressing properly, have clean clothes, taking care of your appearance, taking care of your apartment, taking care of your shoes. I don't know, it could be very, very, very small things. But if we really perfect those things, then we can move on to the next, and so on and so forth. I really believe that. So my advice to people who are younger than me, for example, to people who probably want to leave their country for a better future, and I don't blame them for that. But I really think
mm.
that it's who you are. It's not where you are. It's who you are. Honestly, it is
Wow.
who you are.
Mm,
If you're hardworking, if you're caring, if you really want to do the best you can with the resources you have, with your capabilities, at the best of your capabilities, wherever you are, you're gonna shine no matter where you are in the world.
mm.
And the only difference is going to be that you're gonna have more possibilities. Let's say if you move to America, for example, or if you move to another country, I don't know where, you're just gonna have more possibilities to be more of who you are, but you're not gonna change. If you're miserable
Wow.
in one country, you're going to be miserable in the other. And if you're miserable in a not so great country, you're going to be miserable even in a great country. I can tell you that for a fact. I've experienced it many, many, many times. So it's who you are, not where you are. Do whatever the best you do whatever you can, and do it to the best of your abilities. Everywhere, whatever you do in life, whatever you do it
Mm,
at the best of your
mm.
abilities.
Wow. I think that's so beautiful. So if I just want to put into few words what you just said, if you feel lost, if you feel like you do not belong, the first thing is to be grateful with every single thing that you have. The second thing
Absolutely.
is to set goals and to set goals to improve, not to move backward. And
Yeah.
the third
Yeah.
thing is just to be who you are and keeping in mind that you will not change and you will just improve or display who you are. Wow,
Absolutely.
that's extremely
If
beautiful.
Yeah, I can say, I know this is cliche, and I've heard this many times. I listened to it, but I didn't hear it. You know, when you listen to something so many times, but you don't hear it, it doesn't really attach, like it doesn't really stick. You know, I heard this over and over again. It's like, oh, it's who you are inside. It's the inside that matters. It's all about the inside. The answers are inside and everything. And I used to think, what bullshit. What is this inside? What are they talking about? You know, because I didn't understand. But it really is inside. Because the moment you start to make changes within yourself, you know, the moment you start to make a change, and I mean true change, you know, whatever it is that you don't like about your life, whatever it is, take responsibility. Take responsibility.
Wow.
It's not going to change. Like, unless you change something from within yourself, it's not going to change. And I see that in myself right now. There are things that I want to accomplish, and it's very easy. Like I said, it might have a lot to do with the childhood and with the way I was brought up, with my culture and so on. Because I told you that there's a lot of complaining in many countries. It's not just Albania. I'm sure it's not just Albania. It's many countries all over the world where people complain, and I think this is a human trait, because it's much easier to blame it on the outside than do the work inside. It's so much easier, because doing the work inside takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of energy. And if you blame it on, I don't know, the weather, or I don't know, I don't have enough this, I don't have enough that. No, that's not gonna.
Amazing. Amazing. This was such a beautiful conversation, Alfred. I've learned so much, like always. Let's say, if somebody want to keep in touch with your thoughts, or want to know more about what you do, where can they follow you, or where can they see you?
Right. So right now, at the moment, I have not started, and I told you before we started the podcast, which, by the way, I'm very appreciative for. I really thank you for this. This was great, and I'm really thankful that you made me a part of it. I really appreciate it, and I hope I'm sure that it's going to go well for you. Just keep going, and it's just from here on, it's just going to get better and better and better. So thank you, really, thank you. Right now, at this very moment, I only have my personal account on Instagram where people can follow me. It's at Alfred Luca, or at Alfred.Luca. But I have a little surprise in the future that I'm going to share, and hopefully we can do this again. And I'm going to share it with you and the audience. So
wow,
I think that's going to be
amazing. Looking forward.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to our second conversation, and then we'll have a little surprise.
There we go. I'm excited already. Well, all right. Alfred, thank you so much for being here today. That was a beautiful conversation. I've loved every bit of it, and looking forward to have you again.
Likewise. Thank you so much. I wish you a great day, and I am looking forward to talking again. Thank you so much, and good luck.
Thank you.